scheduled to do a show at WBAB with Joel Martin, and showed up out there, and we talked a little bit about John Keel's book and the fact that I had been to Point Pleasant. And that was pretty much what I thought was going to be the end of my Mothman career. However, right after that program, we started to have some bizarre telephone problems, beginning with picking up a phone and having a high-pitched squeal on it. The house was an old house that I lived in, and I just wrote that off as well. The phone company's having their problems, but it got worse. One instance that I'll never forget is a friend of the family called up, had a conversation with me for 20 minutes on the telephone, talking about all sorts of things that only people who knew me on a personal level would know. And then in the conversation, the person on the other end turned around and said, "Oh, you wanted Rick. He's not here right now." This is after 20 minutes, and we're talking about a person who knew me intimately. So he was able to do my voice perfectly. One time, my oldest daughter answered the telephone, and the voice on the other end told her that he knew that she was at home alone. I was a retired New York City police officer. So, and she was a very, very high-spirited teenager who shot right back at him and said, "Well, why don't you come on over, because I know where my father's off-duty revolver is, and I'll be more than happy to say hello." I would make telephone calls out and be interrupted. The line would go dead. It had never had that problem before. Because I was working closely with the New York City Police Department at the time, I had some friends who were technical people, and they came in and checked the lines, right back to the source at the telephone company, couldn't find any problems. Phone company checked it. We finally put our own taps on the phones, because a lot of this was going on when I wasn't there, and I really wanted to hear what was going on. Finally, thanks to my friends, we were able to trace back one of the calls, only to find out that, according to the technology available at the day, the call was coming from inside the house. Well, that's impossible. You can't call yourself on a one-line telephone. But that was what their conclusion was.
And I caught a glimpse of something to my left coming up over the riverbank, which was probably a quarter of a mile away. Looked like a helicopter coming up over, but once it cleared the trees, I could tell it was a huge bird. And it proceeded to make circles above my car, probably starting out maybe 200 or 300 feet in the air, but every time it would make a circle, it would get lower. And I started speeding up my car. It was a convertible, and I was amazed by the wingspan, which was every bit of 10 feet, and it very probably could have been more than 10 feet. And I had never seen anything like that before. And the last pass it made over my car was probably estimating just 75 feet above my car. I got a good look at the wings. I couldn't see any face at all because it was always going away from me, making the circles. But it was staying up with my car easily, and I was going 75, 80 miles an hour. And it finally made the one last pass, and it went back towards the riverbank, which I never saw it after that. From there, I went on up to Mason, West Virginia, which is 13 miles from here. Stopped at a payphone at a service station, called the local sheriff, who I knew personally, and told him what I'd seen, and he wanted to know if I was afraid to come back in town. I said, no, it didn't bother me. Chances are it went where it's going to go. If it was going to eat me, it would already eat me.
There's quite a lot of evidence. There's actually a lot of bits of the skeleton of Megalini available in collections, and we have a good collection here, bought from an old German chap in 1891. And these three vertebrae give you a good idea of the size of this animal. These are about, each vertebra is about 6 or 8 times the weight of an equivalent Komodo dragon vertebra. So this is a very big beast. And the whole thing, they have bits of the neck vertebra, bits of the body vertebra, some of the tail vertebra, and it's possible you know how many vertebrae are in an animal, one of these lizards. They don't vary very much, so you can work from that up to the size. The other ones here, there's a bit of the upper jaw here, and you put it against there. It came from a skull about the size of this. We have in Queensland Museum has, I think, the back of the skull, and we have other bits with a bit of a lower jaw. So basically the skull is out of a modern lizard scaled up. So you've no great trouble reconstructing the rest of it. The other ones here are limb bones. Now they're pretty massive bones. And that again, the modern Komodo dragon, the same femur, is about half the length, and of course much more slender. So this thing's maybe 8 times the weight of a Komodo dragon femur. This is the bone of the radius from the front limb, the arm. And again, it's a fairly massive, it's much smaller than the thing here, but it's a pretty big animal. We even have something as fragile as the ribs. And we're dealing with a rib cage of an animal this big. So put the vertebra in the middle, and you've really got a fairly bulky body. So the animal's quite well known. There's no single complete skeleton. It would be marvellous to, and we know places where the bones have turned up in the Darling Downs. It'd been marvellous if somebody had the money to go and look, or if something turned up and we heard about it in time to go and collect it. But there's so little money for genuine fossil research in this country that we're struggling. But there's lots of things to find there, and there's still possible for people in this country to find new things. So the people in the country, the properties, the country children, they can make major discoveries, especially after times like recently when there's been lots of floods go through. And the floods erode the riverbanks. This is the time to go out and look. But if they do find something, they shouldn't try and dig it themselves. They should bring in the local experts, the museum, the university people, who know how to dig these things up and recover them and record it. Don't try and do it themselves. Report it as soon as possible.
It said there are stranger things in heaven and earth than we can think of. You've just seen some of them on AnimalX.